everyone. Thank you for joining another Casework stream. Today, we are going to be talking all things CPAP. Super excited to have both Lauren Miller and Michael Ram here with us today. Both have been appointed to the Plaintiff Steering Committee. And so, again, thankful and grateful to have you guys here to share insights and updates as it relates to this litigation. Lauren, why don't we start with you? If you'll give us a little bit of background about the firm that you're with and your role, that would be awesome.
Yeah, sure. I am an attorney at Hagens, Berman, Sobol, Shapiro. We are primarily based in Seattle, but I'm down here in Birmingham, Alabama. I mostly focus on mass torts, and so my focus is personal injuries more so than class and consumer fraud cases. My firm, however, has a lot of experience litigating consumer fraud and antitrust cases. I focus on pharmaceutical drug and medical device litigation, and I also serve on the Zantac Plaintiff Steering Committee.
Wonderful. Thank you. Mike, you'll give us a little background about yourself and the firm that you're with and your role.
Hi, my name is Michael Ram, and I'm a consumer class action lawyer. This is my 40th year of doing that, and I'm with Morgan & Morgan, and specifically I'm the head of Morgan & Morgan's class action consumer products division.
So 40 years, so you know a thing or two.
And I've forgotten more.
Hey, one question I get all the time, and I think I do a great, I provide a great response, but I'd love to hear from you guys. What exactly is a plaintiff steering committee? Like, what is the role? Lauren, do you want to share your thoughts on plaintiff steering committee?
Sure. So plaintiff steering committee typically nowadays is appointed by the judge. I feel like in past litigations, we saw a lot of slates submitted and approved by judges, but lately we've seen an interview process along with applications that have been submitted, and then the judge making the final decision on who is going to be serving on the plaintiff steering committee. So the steering committee is typically comprised of one or several co-lead counsel that lead the litigation and the rest of the steering committee. And then we are also split up into subcommittees. So there are committees that also focus on discovery, science and experts, bellwether trials, and typically those that are on the plaintiff steering committee chair those subcommittees, and we lead the litigation on behalf of plaintiffs.
Wonderful. Michael, anything else you would add, or that pretty much sums it up?
That's a really good summary. This is the latest in a series of MDLs that are now combining mass tort lawyers like Lauren with class lawyers like me. And so it's important to have an organizational structure, as Lauren described, to make sure that the mass side and the class side, and also here the medical monitoring side, are all ably represented.
Great. Okay, well, let's dive into talking about CPAP and to get things rolling. Michael, I wanted to find out from you, how did the issues with the Phillips recalled CPAP, Bipap, and the mechanical ventilators get brought into Courtroom?
Well, as I think everybody knows by now, in April of 2021 or so, Phillips Brown of 2021, the FDA announced that Phillips would be recalling certain CPAP and Bipap and ventilators due to the breakdown of the foam that was used to dampen the sound of the machines, that the foam's breaking down, and then the people using the CPAPs can inhale or ingest the particles, being exposed to toxic chemicals, and so they were going to recall these machines.
Lauren, will you share with us the exact products and machines that are involved in this case?
Yeah, so there are a number of machines that were manufactured by Phillips. Some are CPAP machines, so that means continuous positive airway pressure, and those are primarily for patients that have sleep apnea. And they work by delivering a stream of oxygenated air into your airway, but that comes in through a mask with a tube attached to it. So the pressurized air prevents your airways from collapsing, and you can breathe as you're sleeping. Then there are also the bi-level positive airway pressure machines. So those we call Bipap machines. And those are really similar. They just also, they do an inhale pressure and an exhale pressure.
Excellent. Hey, Lauren, real quick, with your experience with Zantac, one of the things you're hearing a lot about this case is what is the estimated impact? How far back does this go? I imagine your experience dealing with Zantac, dealing with a large volume of claimants is something that's going to be, a struggle for the steering committee. If you could just give an estimated impact, sort of the date ranges and sort of, any sort of experience crossover from your Zantac committee.
That's going to be a hard question for me to answer, so we might want to pause on that one. I don't actually know the exact years. I don't know if we know what Phillips is telling us, but I don't know if we really know the full impact of this. We haven't yet looked at every single machine that was manufactured. I mean, we obviously think they're pretty similar, and if they're recalled, they're going to have similar issues. Zantac is a little bit different because it's the same exact formulation, right? So it was always the same compound way back in 82 or 83. This, I don't know exactly how far back it could go.
I would agree with Lauren that we're still studying the science, and I would add that the recall covers all CPAPs back to 2009 and then through 2021.
Okay. I mean, we do know that I think there was some research that came out, or some metrics, that there was an estimated 22 million Americans suffer from sleep apnea.
Right, and millions of products were recalled.
Mm-hmm. Lauren, a lot of people listening, they may not even know what sleep apnea is. Do you want to share what sleep apnea is?
Yeah, so sleep apnea is a sleep disorder, and it happens when someone cannot breathe very well during their sleep. So they might stop breathing a lot of times, like maybe even hundreds of times while they're sleeping, and therefore they're not getting enough oxygen in their brain or the rest of their body.
Yeah.
And I want to add just a personal note that I can't prevent myself from adding, and that is, in addition to the adults who snore, as Lauren's describing, my own son was born 14 weeks prematurely, and so he stopped breathing.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't ready to come out of the isolate for 14 weeks, and so he had a CPAP because his brain would forget to breathe, and that kept him alive. So you can't really overstate the importance of these devices.
Yeah, for sure. So to date, what are the reported injuries and some of the injuries we can expect to see in the future? Michael, do you want to take that one?
Oh, okay. Well, our firm has been very selective in the personal injury cases that we've been taking on. So there are certain cancers that are linked to respiration, and then there's some diseases that are linked, for liver, kidney, for example. But we're still learning the science in that, and I would kind of defer to Lauren.
Yeah, so I'm the co-chair of the science committee in the litigation, and we are absolutely still investigating and need to find out more. We know several of the chemicals that are involved in the off-gassing and that are contained in the particles that are being produced as the foam degrades. But we're still looking at more information on those chemicals, the amounts of chemicals, and what organ systems they affect.
Okay.
But I would say, kind of the list that plaintiffs generally are looking at are any kind of inflammation to the ear, nose, throat, sinus cavities, kidney damage and liver damage, and then, there's a number of cancer issues potentially as well.
Okay. Well, you mentioned the Plaintiff Steering Committee was recently appointed. What is the committee working on right now? Or what is the main focus? Lauren, if you...
Oh man, there's never a main focus. There's always a lot of focuses. So, initially we're going to start trying to get together a lot of administrative orders that we have to confer with defendants on. Also, getting started on discovery is really important at this stage because there's a lot you can't do until you get the documents from defendants. So we've already done some of those early preliminary discussions with defendants, and we'll certainly do more as we develop an ESI protocol and other things to get document production rolling. Science, of course, is always a really critical focus in the MDL from start to finish, but especially in the early stages, there's still, as I've said, a lot to understand about the machine and the foam used, how it degrades, what causes it to degrade, and the injuries that it causes. So we're already working to better understand that and identify and obtain experts as well.
Has the 30B6 been scheduled at this point, or has that sort of been pushed out a little bit?
Not that I am aware of, at least not that's been discussed in larger groups.
Understood.
Okay. Then from the law and briefing standpoint, the first things we'll be working on are complaints. Because there'll be a class complaint for economic loss, and then after that, there'll be a separate class complaint for medical monitoring, and there will also be a master complaint for personal injuries.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Typically, during a product recall, the manufacturer usually offers a replacement at no cost. Considering this product that people use every single night, has Phillips taken that step, or have they sort of reached out? Lauren, I don't know if this on the Mass side of this is something, but has Phillips initiated that?
Yeah, they have said that they are willing to replace the devices, but they have not made good on their promise. There are millions of devices recalled, and Phillips simply just can't keep up. So individuals are having to purchase separate devices, usually from a competitor, and that's typically coming out of their pocket.
Wow.
And I'd emphasize an obvious point that somebody who needs the CPAP needs it every night.
Right.
They can't wait
Sure.
until Phillips gets around sending the new improved device to everybody, even assuming that one's safe. Yeah.
Having been involved with multiple class actions and mass torts by this point, what are your feelings on the progression of this case and tort? Lauren, you want to start?
Yeah, so I think our leadership, especially our co-leads, are working really hard to progress and manage the cases as efficiently as possible. Sometimes you can run into cases where on one end, the mass tort is kind of left in the abyss and drags on for years and years with not really a timeline or any urgency. And then there's kind of what you have as the so-called rocket docket cases that tend to be a little overmanaged and everybody's running around in a frenzy. This case really seems to kind of be striking the perfect balance thus far, in my opinion.
That's great. Michael, what are your thoughts?
I'd agree, and I'd add that I think everybody is very impressed with Judge Conte, who individually interviewed, I think, 75 candidates.
Wow.
For leadership.
Wow.
And is really focusing on this litigation. And one of the things the judge did, which I thought was really cool, was to also appoint a leadership development committee of junior lawyers who are kind of understudies who will be mentoring and will also be learning from them.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Lauren.
Sorry, just to add to that, Judge Rosenberg did the same thing also in the Zantac Plaintiff Steering Committee. She really initiated the Leadership Development Committee. It had never been done before, and it was 5 lawyers, and she just recently actually elevated them to full plaintiff steering committee positions, and then appointed an additional set of leadership development committee members who have been working on the litigation, which is really great. I wish I had had that, a decade ago when I first got started in litigation, but it's a really neat opportunity. But we as steering committee members need to be diligent about involving them in substantive matters and making sure they're getting the experience and exposure that Judge Conti really wants them to have.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's fantastic opportunity for them.
Yeah, I think that's also a very great way to, incorporate some new, fresh perspectives in different litigations. So, obviously a lot of the, your colleagues that are on these different steering committees over and over again, it's good to get, a new diverse inclusion into the steering committee. So it's a tremendous way to, include obviously new younger attorneys. So that's absolutely great. What would be, and I'll leave this open, whoever wants to, but what would a successful resolution for these CPAP cases? I know that's such a broad statement at this point, it's so early, but just to kind of give our, if it could be something that you can put on a crystal ball, put the crystal ball out, what would be something that would be, a successful view in your eyes at this point with what we know? Mike, I'll put it on you.
Okay, well, I'll go back to the three different complaints that I was talking about. So in the class economic loss complaint, we're looking for the cost of the product, which is not as substantial. In medical monitoring, of course, we're looking for either program or funding of a program to monitor the users of these devices for many years to come, because some of these diseases we're just learning about and could have long latency periods. And then the personal injury cases, I would defer to Lauren, but obviously those cases are extremely valuable. And then there's the question of punitive damages and perhaps injunctive relief.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm well aware that there's still a lot of discovery. There's a lot that needs to happen in order to, find out more. Just kind of, a lot of our personal injury viewers who aren't totally familiar, just to kind of give a little bit of a set expectation level set. So understood.
I guess a question that I am interested in for both of you, it's just, what are the steps your law firms take when approaching a mass tort? What do they look at? What are you looking at? And how do you approach a mass tort? And if it's one that's a good fit for your firm? Lauren, if you want to take that first.
Yeah, so initially for me, there's a lot of investigation that goes into the claims that are underlying the mass tort, right? So I love being a science nerd, which is really odd because my dad's actually a scientist and I hated science growing up. But early on, I really dig into the science and what is really supporting the claims that we're making in a personal injury case. And then look at the number of claims that might be potentially out there. There are, unfortunately, a lot of products that injure individuals that we probably don't ever hear about because there might not be quite as many claims out there. And for it to really fit in for a mass tort, it needs to be a significant number of claims that can be brought forth in that way. So that's kind of the second step. And then we start talking to other firms and seeing if other people are looking at it and, just collaborating and discussing with other people that are in this field and deciding whether or not from there we want to move forward with it.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Mike, what about you? What about your firm?
I guess I would add that my colleagues in Mass Tort, when they're looking at a new case, would first of all make sure that this case would stand on its own individually. We wouldn't sign up everybody just because they used a CPAP machine. So we'd look and see whether we've got plaintiffs who we're willing to try the case for, because just like Lauren's firm, our firm prides itself on trying the cases if necessary, and that's how you extract the best value.
Yeah, no, that's great feedback. And outside of that, any other considerations for a firm looking to get involved in mass tort period?
Well, I'd say, our firm, we have got 800 lawyers, and we've got a lot of lawyers who are nationally recognized in mass torts. And if somebody at a smaller firm wants to refer a case, we're definitely interested in that, provided that the case meets our criteria.
Lauren, any other considerations for a firm that you would have them consider before getting involved into mass torts?
Yeah, so I would say if a firm is new to mass torts, hasn't done a mass tort before, at least hasn't managed a large number of cases in a mass tort previously, to prioritize a couple of things. One would be make sure you set your statute of limitations early. It's very easy to get an influx of cases and then to be playing catch up, and you don't want to be in a position where you miss a statute. And then another would be to make sure that you have an efficient way to speak to your clients regularly, whether that is a newsletter, whether that's contact with staff, sending out an email, updating them on the case. These cases go on for a really long time, and I found that clients don't understand that, because they're used to hearing about people calling a lawyer, and they talk to their lawyer, and they have a deposition, and they have trial, and they don't really understand how mass torts work and how a lot of what we need from them is paperwork, and then might come in on the back end if they're picked for a bellwether case. So making sure that you clearly set that expectation for your client and speak to them regularly in some form is really important.
Yes, I could not agree more. That's one of our tenets, is setting the expectation up front, because clients, I think they sign a retainer and then they're going to be seeing some kind of resolution in 6 months to a year. And then if we have firms, we try to do that, provide all the communication on behalf of the law firms, just trying to keep the plaintiffs informed and engaged, because as you said, it's years. And if they're not great communicators, then unfortunately, the plaintiff feels as though their lawyer just, I don't know, isn't taking care of the case, and they sign up with someone else, and there's just a ton of dual rep issues. So I think that's fantastic advice, and to have a plan in place before you start taking on cases. So that's awesome. Thank you for that. And then I guess one of the next questions, I was just curious, Lauren, did you consider other areas of law before you got into mass tort?
I did. I have to admit, I actually worked for a defense firm
right
out of law school, and I did insurance defense and employment law for 3 years. So I wasn't even exposed to large, complex litigation, and oddly enough, I had to do some Googling about mass torts before I went for the job interview, because I didn't remember from law school really what a mass tort was, or maybe had never even heard the term before. So I did some other work before I ended up in mass torts, but I've been doing this for almost 7 years now, and I love it. I couldn't do anything else.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, Michael, with you been practicing for 40 years, I'm sure you've done a lot of other things. Do you enjoy this litigation, and what have you primarily been focused on, or what is the area of law that you've really enjoyed the most?
Yeah, I really enjoy class actions, and always have. And I like this case in particular because I think it's some really important issue, and a really good group of lawyers. And I particularly am focusing on medical monitorings. Like Lauren's firm, ours is one of the few that's nationally recognized on the mass tort side and on the class side. And medical monitoring, in a sense, even though it's part of the class action complaint, in a sense, it's a hybrid, because you're looking at a lot of the same science you'd look at in a PI case, but then you're looking at some of the legal issues in a class case. And so, and it's also kind of on the cutting edge. So, and in this case particularly, I think it's appropriate. So that's what I'm excited about in this MDL.
Yeah. When you think back just on your career, I know most attorneys, they have that one career defining case or moment that comes to mind when we ask them about, what's the case that stands out the most. Lauren, anything come to mind?
Yeah, so as far as a career defining moment, I'm probably going to tell on myself a little bit, but like the CPAP litigation, the Zantac litigation had an application and an interview process. So it was 2 days of interviews. I think there was about 65 applicants. And I was so freaked out about the interviews that I'm already an over-preparer, but for interviews, we had to have kind of like a 2 to 3 minute pitch. And I wrote out my pitch like probably a month in advance. And I recorded myself practicing it over 300 times. So when that order came out that appointed me to my first plaintiff steering committee, I don't think I've ever, nor will I ever, have that kind of defining moment again in my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. Congratulations. That's great. That's an awesome story. Michael, what about you? What is your career defining moment?
Well, many years ago, I had the privilege to co-try National Association of Radiation Survivors versus the Veterans Administration for veterans who had been exposed to radiation in atomic testing and whose VA claims were getting denied, who couldn't get a lawyer. And so that kind of inspired me to see the power of class actions, especially if you're not afraid to go to trial, and to just appreciate how much more satisfaction there is being on the right side.
Yes. Well, as we kind of mentioned in the very beginning, and Dan touched on this, we have a couple of listeners. One might be personal injury that are looking to get into CPAP, work up some of the cases, maybe leverage a team like CaseWorks, and then refer out those cases. And also just Mass Tort groups that we're working with that might be doing something similar, where they maybe need some advice or to be able to refer out those cases. So I'd love for you guys to be able to share. Lauren, if you want to go first. How can they get in touch with you? Maybe they have some questions, or maybe they want to talk to you about referring cases. What's the best way to track you down?
Yeah, I'm happy to chat with anybody. Just send me an email and we can connect from there.
Awesome. Yep. And we'll include emails when we send this out. Michael, how can folks get a hold of you?
Same for me. And one of the reasons that I am so happy to be at Morgan & Morgan is our email address. So I'm at mram@forthepeople, just how it sounds, not the number 4, mram@forthepeople.com, and love to talk to anybody who's got a potential case.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is a cool email. Well, Lauren, Michael, again, thank you so much. It's just really a privilege and a pleasure to have time to connect with you both, share insights and updates about this litigation, and we're just grateful for your time.
Absolutely. Thank you both so very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Lauren, please give my regards to Steve Berman.
Will do. Thanks.
Thank you.